Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. To start the story, some background you need to know about me. I volunteer to train and raise service dogs. My fiancé says I clearly have a look that says I am weak and a pushover. I have constant encounters with entitled people who are just not ready for my responses when they engage me. I've been in the military for 17 years when this happened and was responsible for managing over 130 service members. I am anything but a pushover. I work with civilians, so I've cultivated a polite exterior because I was counseled for looking unapproachable and scary to civilian counterparts. The story, as I said, I raise service animals, so I fall under the ADA when it comes to regulations on where and what I can do with my puppy. We'll call him Max. Max is an amazingly behaved black lab of 6 months. I have cultivated a level of trust and obedience where I can leave him in a sit with other dogs around. So long as I am in eyesight, he will stay. I've raised a few pups by then, and I would never have done that with them, but Max is amazing, and I can't wait to get him back after his tour of duty helping Mrs. Taylor be independent. I met the HOA tyrant Brenda one Saturday in May 2023. Me, my fiancée Jenna, and Max were going to head on a road trip to visit Jenna's parents. In our preparation, the last on the list is always getting the kids to use the bathroom before a long trip. So we head out, Max gets busy, and I grab a bag to clean it up. I put him in a sit-stay and hand the leash to Jenna, then I start walking to the trash can. It's about 100 feet from where he went. I have clear line of sight to the dog, and he is sitting pretty and alert, watching me intently for a hand cue or voice command. As I'm walking, I hear a womanly screech. I don't quite make it out, but it sounds angry. I ignore it and keep walking to the dumpster, deposit my waste bag, and turn around to head back to my two favorite people. It's then I make eye contact with Brenda. She's your typical HOA enforcer, not an inch over 5 foot and has about the same circumference. The short chopped hair that says, "I'm the manager now." She looks me in the eyes, and I finally listen to her shrill scream. "Your dog must be on a leash and in your hand! The county and state law says so! I will call the cops!" she shrieked. Now, I don't do ignorant, and respect given is respect earned. I was willing to try and de-escalate. Jenna owns the condo and is super non-confrontational. So for her, I try to bring it back down to civil levels of discussion. In a polite but firm voice, I asked, "Did you even look over at the dog before you started yelling at me?" She just bellowed like a banshee again. "The rules are clear. Leash in hand at all times." "Ma'am, if you just look—" I began, but she cut me off. "I know the rules. I'm on the board. You people never listen." This back and forth happens 3 or 4 times, me calm, her escalating in pitch and volume. At this point, she hasn't given respect, so none is required to be given back. I break out my "you done ducked up" NCO to junior voice. It is loud, firm, and clearly states I'm done with your bullcrap, lady. If you would have taken 2 seconds to look, you would see the dog is sitting on a leash in someone's hands, I firmly stated, pointing to where Jenna stood with Max. She stops bellowing at me, looks, and turns a bit red in the face, then musters, "Well, you could just say thank you for my concern." To which I curtly reply, "Shut the duck up and get out of my face." She waddled quickly off, tail tucked, into her condo door. My next meeting with her was about 3 weeks later when I was grilling. The HOA states no charcoal grills and no smoking, BBQ. I was born in the North, but as a military brat moved to the South since I was 2. There is a difference between BBQing and grilling. BBQ is 12 plus hours with coals of hardwood or wood smoking. Grilling is cooking meat on a grill instead of the stove. The HOA put out a reminder, no BBQing on the premises and no coals. So I thought, awesome. Get a small propane grill. It's not BBQ, but it's better than nothing. So I was out grilling some burgers, and I hear that banshee cry all too familiar now. "No grilling allowed. Can't you read the bylaws? No open flames." Brenda screamed from about 20 feet away. Again, she didn't come up to me and talk. She just started screaming. So I looked her right in the eye and with the same firm voice said, "Shut the duck up and go away. If you say one more word, I'll be the one calling the cops for harassment by an HOA member." She sputtered something about no grilling or open flames, and I told her, "Duck off, show me in writing, and by someone other than you." She waddled off, and then I was approached by the HOA president, Derek, with the HOA bylaws and sat to read them, during which Jenna started a conversation with them about another issue we were having with them. She was in the middle of having the state attorney's office ask some questions about activities they were trying to force her into paying for. It wasn't going well for the HOA, and she took this opportunity to introduce herself. "Hi. I'm Jenna, the owner of Unit 204. I believe we have some business to discuss regarding the special assessment fees," she said calmly. While she may be non-confrontational when it comes to small things, she will stand up for herself when it comes to it. Her introducing herself changed everyone's tone, and they became oh so polite. Brenda tried to play the victim to her and say I was mean and could use some manners when engaging with people. "He was absolutely horrible to me," Brenda whined. "I was just trying to enforce the rules, and he cursed at me. No respect whatsoever. I love my soon-to-be wife." She let Brenda paint her tale of how she was a victim. When Brenda finished, Jenna looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You know, I was the one holding the leash that day, and I was standing right here when he was grilling, so no, you got the same respect you gave." Brenda paled and faded to the back. That's when Derek, the president of the HOA, stepped in and told me I can't have the grill and that I can be fined, and I needed to follow the rules of the HOA, or the next time he'll be the one calling the cops. "I'm giving you fair warning now," Derek said sternly. "Next time we catch you breaking the rules, there will be consequences." Well, roger that. It is my job to enforce regulations in the military. I spend hours reading instructions. Nothing pleases me more than when I can shove the black and white in an a-hole's face at work to get my guys what they are owed, or to force them to do the job right. So you want me to follow the rules? Copy that, buddy. So I began my research. I found a few interesting things. No HOA bylaw can be enforced if it is not in the state database. This particular HOA's bylaws were last updated in 2011. It was 2023. They state they follow my county's fire code, which follows NFPA. Finally, the gem, the exact lat and long coordinates of the HOA's property lines. So I get a login for the state's database and print the HOA's bylaws. I print the NFPA, which states in a multifamily home you can store propane tanks no bigger than 2.7 liters, but they can total no more than 5.4 liters cumulatively. I go to Lowe's, get a rope tape measure and stakes. I pull up Google Maps and mark the HOA boundary line on it. Lo and behold, what do I find? A drainage ditch that is city property, not 10 feet from where I was grilling. So I take my coordinates, my stakes, and go carefully mark off the section of city property. Now for the revenge, I call the city-county fire departments and request a permit to grill on said city property. "You really don't need a permit for that, sir," the clerk told me. "No one would care about a small grill there." I insisted, and they said, "It's your $50. They issued an event open flame permit. With both permits, it was $100, but I got permission from the city to grill there for 6 months. The next day, at 0700, I went to set up. I carefully measured so I was at least 3 feet into the city property, set up my cooler with enough meat and beer to grill till doomsday, then waited for the fireworks. It didn't take long for Brenda to come screaming at me. I was 10 feet from the community pool and 3 feet from the sidewalk gazebo that led to the pool. I just hit record on my phone and politely told her, "You have no need to yell and I'm breaking no laws." "You think you're so clever, don't you?" She kept screaming. "No grilling means no grilling. I am tired of you and I'm going to get you arrested and kicked out if it's the last thing I do." She continued, "I haven't liked you since I saw you and have just been waiting to get you kicked out. Now that I know which condo is yours, it is just a matter of time till I find something." On and on she went. I guess me being polite and showing zero fear was pissing her off. She tried to come take my stuff. Big no-no. As she reached for my cooler, I broke out my NCO voice and told her, "If you so much as brush a finger against my property, I will remove the offending body part with force if necessary." This sent her scurrying off again, muttering threats about calling the police. About 20 minutes later, I see 2 cop cars pull up and Derek himself. He is all chummy with the cops, and as they approach, I hear him say, "Yep, same guy. I already told him once before he can't grill on the HOA grounds." He comes to a stop about 10 feet from me. One cop stays with him, the other keeps walking up to me. I have a crap-eating grin on my face. I can hardly wait for the conversation to happen. The cop is slightly put off by my joyous face and slight giggle when I ask, "What seems to be the problem, officer?" I get informed that I am in violation of the bylaws and have been warned once already, and I'm going to receive a ticket for disturbing the peace for threatening the HOA when they were trying to enforce the rules, a ticket for an illegal open flame, a ticket for illegal storage of flammable substances, on and on. The last was if I didn't pack up, I would be arrested and removed. "Sir, I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation," the officer said firmly. Now that he was done, I first handed him my permit from the city to grill. He took it, walked back to Derek, and they discussed it for a moment, then returned. "You can't get a permit from the city to grill on private property," he stated. I then showed him the coordinates for the HOA, the Google Maps gridded drawing, and my current GPS location. Mind you, I am smiling, handing sheet after sheet to him because the grid was not all on one sheet and had addendums. Took about 4 minutes to explain it to him. So you see, officer, I'm actually on city property right now, not HOA property, I explained. I've made sure to be at least 3 feet inside the city land. As I was about to hand him more, he held up a hand to stop me. He then asked with a smirk, "How long have you been planning this?" I told him, about a week. He gave me a look of disbelief, but moved on. He then asked me, "Did you threaten Miss Brenda?" I just played back the recording to him. At the end, he said, "Nothing seems out of place here. You are free to go." I stopped him and asked if I could file a complaint for HOA harassment through him. He said no, that the city clerk's office is the correct place, but he would document harassment by the two of them and file the report for me. "I appreciate that, officer. Thank you for being fair about this," I told him. "In my state, it's illegal to be harassed by the HOA. It comes with jail time of a few months, fines as high as $5K, and immediate removal from the board, plus the possibility of recovery of damages. I settled for them both being removed from the board instead of filing a complaint. "Just so we're clear," I told Derek as the police were leaving, "I know my rights and I know the actual rules. Maybe next time, try talking to people first." I waved to Brenda every day I grilled or showed her my leash if I had Max. The look on her face was always priceless. Since that day, the HOA meetings have been remarkably more pleasant. The new board members actually communicate with residents before making accusations, and I've even volunteered to help review their outdated bylaws. Jenna and I got married last summer, and Max has gone on to become a successful service dog for Mrs. Taylor. I still train service dogs, and these days, when new residents move in, they're given accurate information about service animals in training. As for Brenda, I heard she moved to another complex across town. I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. The next one is an Entitled People story. I own a small boutique gift shop in a strip mall, the kind of place that sells handmade crafts, locally sourced products, and artisan goods. I've been running it for about 5 years now, and in that time I've dealt with my fair share of difficult customers. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened one afternoon when 2 women walked in and decided to make my life a living nightmare. It started normally enough. These 2 women, probably in their late 40s or early 50s, came in about an hour before closing time. They were dressed like they were on their way to some charity luncheon, all designer bags and expensive sunglasses perched on their heads. They immediately started browsing through the store with this air of superiority that I've learned to recognize over the years. I greeted them politely and told them to let me know if they needed any help. They barely acknowledged me, just gave me these dismissive little waves like I was some servant interrupting their shopping experience. Fine, whatever. I went back to restocking some shelves and let them do their thing. About 20 minutes later, they approached the counter with a shopping bag from another store. That should have been my first red flag. One of them pulled out several items from the bag, candles that had clearly been burned, a decorative bowl with a visible chip in it, and some bath products that were half empty. She announced they wanted to return these items for store credit. I looked at the products and immediately knew we had a problem. First of all, I didn't recognize half of these items as things we even sold. Second, they were obviously used and damaged. Third, we have a very clear return policy posted at the register and on every receipt, unopened items with receipt within 30 days. I explained this to them as politely as I could. I told them I didn't think these were even from my store, and even if they were, I couldn't accept returns on used and damaged merchandise without a receipt. That's when things started going downhill fast. The first woman insisted these were absolutely from my store and that I was calling her a liar. Her friend joined in, backing her up with this indignant tone. They started getting louder, saying they spent thousands of dollars at shops like mine and they shouldn't need receipts because they were clearly valuable customers. I stood my ground and repeated the policy. No receipt, no return, especially not for used items. They demanded to speak to the manager. I told them I was the owner. They demanded to speak to my manager. I explained again that I owned the store and there was no one above me to speak to. This seemed to make them even angrier. Like, how dare I own a business and not let them do whatever they wanted? Then one of them switched tactics. She said she wanted to buy everything in the store but needed a 60% discount because she was planning a big event. 60%. I almost laughed, but managed to keep my composure. I explained that we don't offer bulk discounts like that, and even if we did, it would need to be arranged in advance with a significant order. This was apparently the wrong thing to say. They both started raising their voices, saying I was being unreasonable and that I was going to lose their business forever. I wanted to point out that they hadn't actually bought anything and were trying to return items they probably didn't even purchase from me, but I kept that thought to myself. That's when things got really ugly. One of them reached across the counter and grabbed a display of small ceramic figurines. Before I could react, she swept her arm across it, sending about $30 worth of merchandise crashing to the floor. Her friends started doing the same thing, moving through the store and knocking things off shelves. I told them they needed to leave immediately or I would call the police. And this is where the malicious compliance comes in. One of them turned to me, got right in my face, and said, and I remember this clearly because of how absurd it was, that I should go ahead and call the cops. She said they hadn't done anything wrong and that the police would side with them because they were being discriminated against by a rude shop owner. Her friend chimed in, agreeing enthusiastically. She actually said something like, "I dare you to call them." They both seemed absolutely convinced that I wouldn't actually do it, or that if I did, nothing would happen to them. They kept going through my store, knocking over displays, pulling items off shelves, even opening product packages and dumping the contents on the floor. So I did exactly what they demanded. I pulled out my phone and called 911 right in front of them. I calmly explained to the dispatcher that 2 customers were destroying my store and refusing to leave. The dispatcher said officers were on their way. The looks on their faces when they realized I actually called were priceless. The first woman immediately stopped what she was doing and said I was overreacting. Her friends started backpedaling too, saying they were just upset customers and I was being dramatic. They both tried to act like they hadn't just spent the last few minutes systematically destroying my inventory. But here's the thing. My store has security cameras, good ones. They cover every angle of the shop, including the register area where our whole conversation started. I've had issues with shoplifters before, so I invested in a decent security system. These women had no idea they'd been recorded the entire time. I told them the police were on their way and they needed to wait. Suddenly they wanted to leave. They headed for the door, but I stepped in front of it. I wasn't about to physically stop them, but I told them if they left now, I would press charges for destruction of property and leaving the scene. They could either wait for the police like they'd insisted I call, or they could leave and face additional charges. They chose to stay, probably because they still thought they could talk their way out of it. They spent the next 10 minutes alternating between threatening to sue me and trying to act like victims. They claimed I had provoked them, that I was discriminating against them, that their lawyer was going to destroy my business. The whole performance was almost entertaining if it weren't for the fact that my store looked like a tornado had gone through it. The police arrived about 12 minutes after I called. 2 officers came in, and I could tell they were taking in the scene. Broken merchandise everywhere, open packages, products scattered across the floor. The women immediately started talking over each other, trying to explain to the officers that I had refused to help them and had been rude and that they were just frustrated customers. I stayed calm and explained what had actually happened from the beginning. I told them about the return attempt with used merchandise and no receipt, the demand for an unreasonable discount, and then the destruction of my property when they didn't get what they wanted. Then I mentioned the security cameras. One of the officers asked if he could review the footage. I took him to the back office and pulled up the recordings on my computer. We watched the whole thing play out. Them trying to return clearly used items, me explaining the policy, them getting aggressive, and then the systematic destruction of my store. The audio picked up everything too, including the part where they dared me to call the police. The officer took notes, and then we went back out to the store. His partner had been keeping the 2 women separated and getting their information. When the first officer came back, he had a very different demeanor. He asked the women if they'd like to explain why they destroyed property after being told no. They tried to backtrack again, but it was too late. The officer told them they were being charged with destruction of property and disorderly conduct. The amount of damage was enough to make it more than just a petty misdemeanor. One of them started crying, saying this would ruin her reputation. The other one was still trying to argue, saying I had no right to refuse their return. The officer very patiently explained that businesses have the right to enforce their policies and that destroying property because you don't get your way is illegal. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I said absolutely yes. They'd caused several $100s in damage, not to mention the time and stress of dealing with this whole situation. Both women were issued citations and told they'd need to appear in court. The officer also informed them that I could sue for damages in civil court on top of the criminal charges. Their tears and indignation quickly turned to panic when they realized this was actually serious. Before they left, one of the officers suggested I file a restraining order against them if they tried to contact me or come back to the store. I took his advice. He also took copies of the security footage for evidence. After they left with their citations, I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up the mess and documenting all the damage for insurance and court purposes. The total came to about $800 in destroyed merchandise and damaged displays. The court date came a few weeks later. Both women showed up with a lawyer who tried to negotiate a plea deal. I refused to drop the charges. The judge was not sympathetic to their claims of being provoked. He watched the security footage and listened to the audio of them daring me to call the police. He ended up ordering them to pay restitution for all damages plus court fees, assign them community service, and put them on probation. The best part was that the judge specifically mentioned in his ruling that their demand for me to call the police showed they didn't believe there would be consequences for their actions. He called it a clear case of entitled behavior meeting reality. I never saw either of them again. They paid the restitution in full, probably because their lawyer told them fighting it would cost even more. My store went back to normal, and I even got a few new customers who heard about the incident and wanted to support a local business that stood up to entitled people. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the best way to deal with unreasonable people is to give them exactly what they ask for. They dared me to call the cops, so I did. They got exactly what they deserved. The next one is a petty revenge story. A few years ago, I was an events manager in a popular Latin American-themed cocktail bar, so I've had more than my fair share of Karen interactions. This one takes the taco, though. Karen was a nightmare from the beginning. Rude, inflexible, and a general pain in the butt. She was planning her 40th birthday, and nothing I planned or suggested was ever good enough, but I worked hard and put together something that she was eventually happy with. Roll on the party, and oh boy, this woman was in full-on Karen mode. She hated the place she'd been put, hated how we decorated, there wasn't enough food, blah blah blah. She made 2 of the waiting staff cry and was so awful that the manager told me to take over as I'd dealt with her before. Thanks. The rest of the evening went well. She got good and drunk, and when I said goodbye as I left, she gave me a hug and did thank you. I thought I'd nailed it. Nope. The next day, I receive an email from Karen formally complaining about everything and saying how I'd lied to her, she wanted her money back and compensation, etc., etc., etc. I had to grit my teeth and respond, but ended having to escalate to my wonderful area manager as I was so annoyed. Roll on a year and I'm in a different job. I fall ill with a UTI, which I ignored until it became a hideous kidney infection. My then BF takes me to the walk-in doctors, but I'm in so much pain that I get given an appointment for the next morning so I can go home and sleep. The next morning, I show up to my appointment in agony and get called into the appointment room. To my utter joy, the nurse who is assessing me is none other than Karen. If she recognized me, she hit it well. She went through all the questions, then asked me to give a urine sample. I took the tub to the bathroom to fill it up. Being female, it's not easy to aim, so the outside of the tub got nice and soggy with my infected urine. The pleasure I had passing her a damp tub of my piss made me feel better than even the antibiotics did, and it brings a smile to my face even now. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened over 5 years ago, and it still ticks me off whenever I think about it. Also, sorry about how long this is, LOL. I was 17 working at a big theme park and had been working there for the better part of the year. I had quickly picked things up and was usually regarded as the responsible one on the team when it was just a bunch of us teens working a ride. We had a college student intern lead who was not good at leading or training new hires. We'll call him M. At my main ride, it required 3 people minimum to operate. 1 person in the control booth, 1 at the entrance gate, and 1 at the exit. However, we could have 4 or 5 if we were incredibly busy to help deal with the line. The people in the booth and at the entrance could not see the person at the exit directly, so we used radios. The control booth also had a camera on the exit gate. From day 1 on the job, we were taught hand signals in case the radio dies or for quick communication. These signals were universal across the entire park. That summer, 3 freshly certified kids, we had to take tests to prove we paid attention to training, started the ride with someone locked inside the fence, aka not in a seat. Twice it was another employee, once it was a guest, which was a huge deal. The thing with those incidents was that those in the control booth didn't notice their mistake until the others screamed at them to hit the e-stop. Those new hires were either retrained or moved to a simpler ride. Well, one incredibly busy day, there were 5 of us running things, me, M, and 3 others. M had been called over to another ride, which normally wasn't an issue. About an hour later, someone was scheduled to go home, and M hadn't come back yet. I called the other ride and asked them to send him back. We could have run things with 3 of us, but it was super busy and we really needed a 4th. A few minutes later, someone, not our lead, was sent over to take over. Weird, but no big deal. Another hour or so went by, someone else needed to go home. I called again asking for M. Also, all the radio's batteries were dead, dying. Things had slowed down, so I, being the spare 4th person, took the radios to the office to get fresh batteries. This took less than 10 minutes, and in that time, the guys had switched to hand signals as we were trained. When I came back, our lead had once again sent over someone else to take his spot. At this point, I realized that M was probably just shooting the crap in the nice air-conditioned booth at the other ride. Now, the guy that got sent over to us was normally at a roller coaster and hadn't been at this ride in over a month, so I gave him a quick review and he took controls. I turned around for maybe 30 seconds when I hear yelling. I turn around and the ride was stopped maybe 3 feet off the ground with our entrance guy locked in the fence. The guy at controls saw what he did and hit the E-stop, something that the other screw-ups that summer did not think to do. We had to call upper management, and wouldn't you know, M came running over. This time, the highest of the higher-ups came over as well. They pulled each of us aside and interrogated us, which was odd, then walked away and talked for like half an hour. They then fired the guy at controls on the spot and came up with BS reasons to get the rest of us removed from running rides. They absolutely were only doing that to make an example of us. I tried to rip into M for shirking his duties, but as an anxiety-ridden kid, it didn't hit very hard. I was mainly pissed off that they fired the poor guy who never should have been there in the first place. Remember I took the already dead radios earlier? They tried to say I had removed communication devices from the ride area, which prevented them from letting controls know they were outside the gate. They were basically trying to pin the whole thing on me. Total bull. BC, this happened after I brought them back. I assume M threw me under the bus for being in charge while he wasn't there. Also, we had hand signals. I tried explaining that to them, but they didn't give a crap. I refused to sign the paperwork, which would be admitting fault, so this fight was stretched over multiple days. Plus, I was leaving for college in like 2 weeks and didn't want to spend my last days of summer cleaning bathrooms. They gave us a new rule. If a single radio was dying, we had to call a manager to fetch us a new battery, even if we had people to spare to go grab one instead. If a radio died, we had to close the ride. Managers roamed around the whole area and were responsible for so much, so if you called them and it wasn't urgent, it could take a long time for them to show up. The next day my radio was dying, I called the manager, half hour goes by, I call again, my radio died, I shut down the ride. The people in the over an hour line got pissed. I explained to people that we had to close because of the radios. Naturally, they got even more pissed BC of how stupid that was. Manager shows up minutes later, I took the battery from him with a smile on my face and he left without saying a word. After many complaints, management was magically fine with us using hand signals again. I never signed that paperwork, I left for college, and funny enough, M also went to the same college. I ran into him once, he just kinda nodded at me, I gave him a dirty look, and I never saw him again. The next summer, I was rehired by the park as a lead and actually did my damn job. TLDR. When I was working at a theme park, we had several incidents of someone at my ride starting it up with people locked inside the gate. This happened again when I was there because our lead, who was at another ride, was sending over inexperienced people instead of coming back and helping us. Upper management fired the guy who should have never been there, and my lead tried to blame it on me and get me sent to janitorial duty. I fought them and they made up a rule stating that if a single radio battery died, we had to close the ride until a manager brought us a new one. After I closed it down many times over the next few days and got tons of complaints, they were okay with us getting the batteries ourselves using hand signals again. Anyway,